a lot of the businesses that have built themselves off the back of TikTok Shop are going to like suddenly find themselves with nowhere to go. And I realized how messed up the fashion industry is. Sometimes like a $20 t-shirt will be better traveled than you are.
If there was one piece of advice for how to fix this, how do you fix this crisis?
Well, my advice to consumers is you have to buy less. Because we've got to make sure that our purchases are really, really considered rather than in the heat of the moment.
Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Dare to be Fearless. I have been in London now for about a year, but I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I met my guest today, Tiffanie Darke. Before I get into this episode, make sure that you're following Dare to be Fearless on social media, which is at Dare and the number 2 be Fearless, as well as my personal social media, which is Alexa_Curtis. So I met Tiffanie years ago when she was at A&E, and since then she's left New York, come back to London, where you're from, put out your 5th book, 4th book?
Oh, I haven't counted. It might be 5, yeah.
5th book, oh my gosh. And I reconnected with you at an event last year that I moderated on a panel about sustainability. Now, I had never been aware of how important this topic was until that panel, and I was shocked to hear about fast fashion and how much this is impacting and affecting the world and the cycle of it. So I would love for you to start with your background, and then we'll go into more of the foray into sustainability.
Well, the vast amount of my career has been as a fashion editor, and I kind of think of myself as a kind of gamekeeper turned poacher, which is that I advocated for buying a lot of fashion for most of the time I've been a fashion editor. So it was all about investing in new trends, investing in new pieces. I was authoring those kind of features that were like, 27 skirt shapes to wear now, or, 6 shoe styles you need for spring, basically asking people to buy more and more and more. And that is really how fashion has grown so much over the last 20 years, is by the sort of dovetailing of democratizing fashion. So we've been able to kind of buy into high fashion at a much cheaper price point, but also encouraging people to buy a lot of it. So a lot of trends that you need to buy into, recycling lots of different things through your wardrobe. And none of it has really addressed the fact that whilst we are consuming all of this fashion, it hasn't had anywhere to go. And 60% of the fashion and textiles and clothing pieces that are made on this earth are made of unbiodegradable materials. So that is synthetic materials made from plastic, which of course comes from oil. And those materials will not biodegrade. They will not break down in landfill for thousands of years. And you've probably seen those pictures of the Atacama Desert taken from space, or, kind of seaports in Ghana, where all of the West's waste textiles are just mounting up in huge piles, and they've got nowhere to go.
When you were at A&E, what was your exact role? Because going into this type of market now is quite specific. I mean, what piqued your interest about sustainability?
Well, at A&E, I was editor-in-chief of a few of their channels, so history and biography and the arts and entertainment channel. But my background previous to that had been fashion, and my background previous to that was news journalism. So I've always seen myself as a journalist. But it seems staggering to me that all the time that I was a journalist working in the fashion industry, I never actually asked, where do my clothes come from and where do my clothes go? And after I left A&E and I came back to London, I took on the Harrods editor-in-chief role. So I kind of went back to fashion. The Harrods.
Wow, okay.
Which obviously was really good fun for a couple of years until the pandemic. And then it became a really kind of crunchy moment where basically Harrods had never shut in the whole of its history. It had always, all the way through World War I, all the way through World War II, even the IRA bomb in the 80s, it never closed its doors. So when the pandemic came, it was, for many businesses as well, a huge moment of reckoning. And my role as editor-in-chief of Harrods had been to kind of produce the 40 or 50 issues of the magazines every year, to run all of their e-com, to do the in-store video, to do all of the social media channels, and very quickly all of that stuff was kind of shut down, and Harrods figured out eventually that the way that they could continue to bring in money was by contacting the very ultra high net worth customers through personal social media. So my job went from doing all of those channels to basically taking WhatsApp pictures of Louis Vuitton handbags and sending them to the important customers. And there was this crazy day in the middle of lockdown where I was cycling across London, let myself back in to Harrods through the back door. It's dark, none of the music's playing, none of the escalators are going. I'm taking pictures of handbags, sending it to the personal shoppers to send to the ultra high net worths, cycling back through lockdown London. And it was a Thursday actually, and in London and Thursdays or across the UK during the pandemic, we had Clap for Carers night. So I grabbed my kids, stood on the doorstep, banging the saucepans for the nurses and the first responders, and realized there was this just huge disconnect in the world, and realized that I had to understand what was going on. And I went back to school, I went to Cambridge, and I did a sustainability course, and I started to learn about supply chains. And I realized how messed up the fashion industry is. Because if you think about the way a supply chain works in fashion, you may or may not know this, but sometimes like a $20 t-shirt will be better traveled than you are. Mm-hmm. The cotton may have been grown in India, the cotton may have been spun in Turkey, the garment may have been stitched in Bangladesh, and it then may have been shipped to, say, the States to sell. I mean, it's done several continents before it's even got there. And then if you're over that garment and you chuck it in the recycling bin, the chances are it's not going to go to a charity shop. It's going to go all the way back to, in this case, possibly Pakistan, which is the Silicon Valley of recycling. So that very low value garment, a $20 t-shirt, will have done all of that pinging across the world just in its life cycle. And that just doesn't make any sense anymore.
Wait, so hold on. You're saying during COVID, Harrods stayed open by essentially becoming like a personal shopper too. Yeah. When they've got these massive stores, for people who don't know, I mean, Harrods is like the biggest department store, right, in London.
Yeah.
And that's the way they stayed open.
Mm-hmm.
So was there a moment, I mean, do you remember standing, I guess, on your doorstep thinking, like, I need a career shift?
Yeah, I mean, there was a moment, I think, during the pandemic when everybody realized that none of it made sense anymore. The world was in lockdown. There was this, virus, and no one knew where it had come from. There was this sense that perhaps the way that man's encroachment on nature had been somehow responsible for this. That all of these supply chains that were suddenly blocked up all over the world, people started to look at them as like, why are we making stuff in the Far East and shipping it halfway across the world to sell it here, when in fact we could just be doing it on our doorstep, and what has been lost in the process. Like all of these things started to be questioned. And then, this idea of the acquisition of goods as well, like what was really of value in the world, also started to be questioned. And I remember within the fashion industry, there was this huge movement. It was like, oh, we've got to stop the fashion shows. It's crazy that we're traveling all the way around the world for all of these fashion shows. They could all just be held in one place or even online. And there were all these resolutions that were made. And then the moment the world came out of lockdown and there was that massive revenge spend move, all the luxury goods companies, just their revenue, their sales went, 30, 40% up. And all of the resolutions were lost. Anyway, it's interesting because where we are now is that revenge spend is over. The economic crisis is biting. Growth is flat or down this year for many of those brands, and they have to finally face up to some of the questions that they were asking themselves 3 or 4 years ago. Like, what is value? What is the value relationship between an object and an owner? How should we be making things? How should we be compensating people who are making these things for us? There was a big scandal last year when it was discovered that Dior and Armani handbags were being made in an Italian sweatshop factory for $50 a piece, that the working conditions were not compliant with what they should have been, and that these bags were being sold for $2,500, $3,000 or 3,000 euros. And that is not the expectation that you have of an Armani or Dior handbag. Like, the stuff has got out of control. We want quality, we want craft, we want rarity from our luxury brands. We don't want volume merchandising.
Why, though, when that comes out, do I feel like I hear it and then it goes away so fast? Is it PR control on the brand side? Is it that people don't ever want to get to the point where they really can think, wow, this handbag was made for $50 and I spent X amount of money on it?
It's a really good question, Alexa. I mean, I think we have a responsibility as consumers, which is that we have not quieted that need in ourselves to consume more. Like, we are craven for desirability and acquisition. I don't know if you've seen that amazing Netflix documentary Buy Now,
Yes,
The Shopping Conspiracy.
I did watch it,
yeah, I mean, it shows you how, as consumers, we are being manipulated by algorithms, by brands who are kind of, desperate to grow the volume of their sales. So in many ways, we're kind of pawns in this, but also, we have this idea that as consumers or as citizens, if you like, the way for us to feel good or to treat ourselves or to kind of compensate for things when they're not going so well is to go out and buy something. And it's not coincidental, in my view, that we are in the midst of a big mental health crisis at the same time as we have consumption levels that are off the chart. Those two things are hand in hand.
Is there a level of lack of confidence or insecurity just throughout society, right, in people that makes this crisis with fast fashion and the prices worse?
In what way? It's an interesting question.
That it's always been notorious, right? Someone is wearing this bag because they, like someone who buys a Kelly bag, that's someone's salary in a year. But would they buy that bag if it wasn't labeled by Hermes, right? Would they buy this type of pair of shoes if someone didn't know what the shoe was?
Well, that's a good question. They had there was the Walmart Birkin.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about that.
The Workin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's happened is that these luxury brands, at the same time as trying to democratize themselves, at the same time as like saying, oh, you can't buy an Hermes bag, but you can buy an Hermes lipstick. They've made us really, really craven for the brand. Like, we've got to have that brand because it's a status for us. It's like, it's desire. I got to, if I can buy into Hermes, then I'm this type of person. Yeah. To the extent that obviously we can't buy into it because it is so ridiculously expensive, and they have price hiked like triple times 5 times 10 times in the last 5 years. So if Walmart can produce a knockoff Birkin at like $80, I think it was.
75 US.
75 US, then why not get that? Yeah. Because who's going to know the difference? And actually, I see more and more stuff now around dupes because people have got so good at dupes. And in fact, there are whole brands that are building themselves on the basis that they're just duping what other brands are doing.
But let me ask you though, if it's a dupe, right, that means it's being made for probably in a sweatshop somewhere for such a small amount of money. So is that worse than a Birkin or a designer luxury bag?
It is worse. Yeah, it is worse. I mean, somewhere like Hermes, for instance, they definitely have a huge emphasis on craft, and they say that one of the reasons why their bags are so expensive is because they just can't make enough to reach the demand. So there is a rarity and a craftsmanship attached to that brand, and that's one of the reasons why that brand is growing. But I would argue with something like Dior or Armani, where there is no limit to the amount of bags that they will sell. The craftsmanship that is going into like the book bag that was being made in that Italian sweatshop, for instance, was just not there.
Mm-hmm. So what's your advice? Like, if there was one piece of advice for how to fix this, how do you fix this crisis?
Well, my advice to consumers is you have to buy less. Like, you have to value what you're buying more, buy less and buy better. So I have a campaign called The Rule of 5, which is try and only buy 5 new things this year. And if you were only going to buy 5 new things, what would those things be? Would they be really special? Like if it was like after the war and we were in rationing and I said to you, Alexa, right, that's it. You can only buy 5 things this year. You've only got 5 coupons.
And only clothing.
Only clothing, yeah. 5 new items of clothing. Then, you're actually going to have more to spend on those 5 items than if you were to buy like 30 or 40 items. Yeah. So therefore, they can be really, really lovely things. And you can really spend time researching them and looking into the things that you really want and that actually you've got a proper need for. And you could choose carefully. And so instead of walking into Zara and just buying it because it's easy and it's cheap and it's there, you can buy from an independent brand that has got really beautiful materials, that has got incredible craftsmanship that has gone into it. That it's doing something creative and interesting and different, and then because you've spent so much time thinking about it, and because it's a rare purchase for you, your relationship with that thing when you've bought it is you really treasure it, and you want to look after it, and you want to keep it for a long time. You want it to last for you for a long time. So, loved clothes last longer. It's really about, you've got to fix that relationship with your objects. And it works for clothes, but it works for other things as well. You can extend it across the way that you are acquiring things. But, my other argument is that we've all got too much. Like, we are sick of our overconsumption. When I launched the Rule of Five campaign, I did it for climate reasons, but overwhelmingly the response was, I'm just fed up of buying too much. You've probably got too much stuff in your closet. You've probably got too much stuff in your flat. We've all got too much stuff. How do we have less and value it more?
So do you love places like Vinted or Poshmark, these reselling platforms? Are you like a diehard fan of these? Or?
Well, it's complicated because the thing is that those secondhand platforms, there's no sign that they're slowing primary purchase. So basically, if the secondhand market meant that we were buying less stuff, that would be a good thing, but it's not. It's actually enabling us to buy more stuff because I'm thinking, I can buy this and then I can just sell it on Vinted. Vinted is good, like buying secondhand is good, but my advice is only buy 4 secondhand things a year and 5 new. Because actually the whole point is we've got to slow down our consumption. We've got to produce less, we've got to consume less. We've got to produce better and consume better.
I think my problem with this is not problem, but what I wish could be fixed is just for the young people. I mean, if someone's 23 and they're watching this and they're like, I wish I could afford an $150 blazer from a young designer, but I need to go to Zara. I mean, what do you say to that person who's got like their first job interview, but they're broke?
Yeah, so I think it's really, really much easier for people who are a little bit further on and they've got a bigger wardrobe. And actually, if you're a student and you're coming out of uni and you're transitioning into the world of work, you're probably going to have to start from scratch with your wardrobe. But here's the thing. I've got pieces in my wardrobe that I bought in the 1990s for my first job. But I bought real quality back then because it was affordable, actually. So if you're thinking about buying something for your first job, think about, okay, if I can just stretch that little bit more, if I can, instead of buying 3 jackets, I just buy 1 jacket and that jacket can last me 3, 5 years, how much better is that going to be? And actually, that is a good reason to go secondhand because you can find really good quality stuff secondhand now because of all the people that are buying good quality and then sticking it on secondhand websites.
Are you someone then who, if you were in a room, or maybe you have been with like the CEO of Shein, Shine, whatever it is, or Temu, I mean, what would you say to them? Because this is where a lot of this fast fashion stuff started, right?
Yeah. Shein is like the enemy number 1 right now, unfortunately. I mean, they were actually in the Houses of Parliament yesterday, or the day before yesterday, being questioned by a parliamentary committee.
Really?
Well, because they're trying to IPO on the London stock market. And the parliamentary committee was wanting to know more about their supply chains. And they got into a terrible mess in the questioning because they couldn't say whether they were producing any of their goods in China because they wanted to understand whether they were using cotton from Xinjiang, which is an area of China that has been...
of course they are, though, no?
Well, exactly. They've already come up with factories in China where they're producing stuff where they say they have really good standards, but then they weren't able to answer the parliamentary questions around whether they were producing in Xinjiang, which has allegations of slavery next to that cotton supply chain. So they're in a kind of terrible muddle. But the thing that's actually worse about Shein, for me, the absolute worst thing about it, is the amount of stuff it's producing. So because it is able to produce low quality product incredibly fast and incredibly quickly, it can charge very little for it. So it means that if you are a Shein shopper, you can have a Shein haul, which means that you can spend $100 and get like 20 things. And that is the worst of all worlds in my book. It's like, actually spend $100 on one thing and make it a really brilliant, gorgeous thing that is made of natural materials that are going to eventually biodegrade or have a second life. They're going to last you for a long time. Don't buy this synthetic rubbish that is really cheaply made. And also, here's the thing, this is the next big frontier for fashion that it has to face up to, is a lot of this very cheaply made synthetic stuff is covered in chemicals that are really harmful to our health. So you can't actually see them. It's in the finishing. It's in the way that it might be, stain proof or waterproof or sweat proof. All of these things that has allowed these fabrics to become more modern, shall we say, or kind of, more utilitarian, have relied on chemicals that we're now beginning to understand are in our waterways, are next to our skin, and they may well be harmful for us. And there's mounting evidence to suggest that. And if you want to look into that further, I would read Alden Wicker's book To Die For, or to watch Jeff Garner's film Let Them Be Naked, because all the evidence is in those two things.
I didn't even think about what the chemicals are in these items, or even the chemicals that must be around the people who are making the items, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can do, if you buy something from China on Amazon, when you open the package, just smell it.
It's awful.
It smells disgusting.
Yeah.
That's the chemicals.
So how many people, I guess, do we need to fix this, right? Like, how far does this go in the sense of, okay, someone listens to this, or 5 people out of 20 decide to stop buying fast fashion after this episode. Is that enough?
Well, on the sustainability course that I did, they talked about how in order for real change to happen, you need 4 sort of sections of society, if you like, to get behind each other. So consumers, legislation, business, and finance. And if those 4 sectors work together, you've got real change. So we absolutely need legislation. Like, everybody knew that cigarettes gave you cancer, but it wasn't until they legislated against them and put huge tax prices and, marketing bans and advertising bans against them that the world stopped smoking. Same with seat belts, same with all of those things that they eventually discovered were harmful for us. So legislation, number 1. But for me, my job as a journalist and an editor and a communicator is I speak to consumers. And I actually think that if consumers can ask for change, then business will provide it. Finance will only put money against successful businesses, and legislation will come in behind that. What we really need for change to happen quickly is legislation to come in now. But in the meantime, what we can do as consumers is to start voting with our money. And actually, one of the ways that it's good to think about it is, don't think of yourself as a consumer, think of yourself as a citizen. So when you are making a purchase, you are basically voting. So if you're buying something from Amazon that's made in China, you're voting for that network and that supply chain and that way that something is made and put into the world. But if you're buying something from a local producer that has used natural materials and good supply chain practices and good labor practices, then you're voting for that network. So think of your purchases as votes.
Oh, that's interesting. So if you're on Amazon or you're looking for something, do you have any advice for, like, what do you search up? Say you want to find a laptop cover and the first place you go to is Amazon. Do you type in not Chinese Amazon cover?
Well, I would suggest you don't go to Amazon in the first place.
Really? So you're not a fan of Amazon at all?
No, I mean, it's an amazing company in terms of what it's been able to deliver in terms of efficiencies and, bringing all of these makers to market. But ultimately, the filter on Amazon is price, right? You're going to look for the cheapest thing. But can you find something that is a little bit more expensive, that will last a little bit longer, that will have better product integrity? That's what you've got to think about. So, I mean, laptop cover, I bought one recently. You just go for recycled materials. So you need something that is hardy and durable. I mean, it's very hard to get away from plastic there. So can you use plastic that is already in the world rather than virgin plastic, which is being put more plastic in the world? So, go for recycled, type in sustainable, see what comes up. But I mean, you've got to just think really carefully about the things that you're using and whether you can be using things that are just a little bit better. And that's where an awful lot of education is required, because the amount of knowledge that a consumer needs now in order to make better choices is a lot. But, start with recycled, start with natural materials. Like, could you find a rubber laptop case? That's a natural material. At least you know that after you finished using it, it's going to go away, unlike plastic.
It almost seems like there's 2 parts of this issue, the overconsumption of people just buying stuff they don't need. And then the second part is not looking enough at the price or where it's manufactured. That's both an obsession with buying but also then not doing the due diligence on the effects of what happens when you are obsessed with just buying items or needing something so fast.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all motivated by price. My God, I am, definitely. And I think the equation or the fashion maths, if you like, that you have to do in your head is the cost per wear. So, you know, if I buy this $20 shirt, how long is it going to last me realistically? You know, and once it's been through the wash a few times, it's lost its shape, it's lost its color. You know, how long is it going to last me? Whereas if I was to buy a shirt that was made of really beautiful 100% organic cotton.
Which probably needs to be dry clean, perhaps.
Dry cleaning's not very good either.
I knew you were going to say dry cleaning's bad. So what about that? Because all the luxury stuff is dry clean usually.
Well, you know what I've learned to do, which I never used to do, is iron. I do my own ironing now, which I never used to do. I was like, life's too short for ironing, just send it to the dry cleaners. But actually now, the white organic cotton poplin shirt that I bought 2 years ago, that still I've managed not to stain. Thank you, God. I wash it and iron it myself.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's just, you know, but I also try not to wash things too much. But you know what? If you buy natural materials, they need less washing. So for instance, my favorite material this year has been wool. You know, you can buy wool activewear now. You can buy wool underwear. You can buy wool socks, but 100% wool. It's amazing. You don't need to wash it that often.
Interesting. So dry cleaning, I figured you would say, is just as bad. Going back to, I mean, back when I met you, I think even right before that, Fashion Week was really still a thing. I mean, I remember when I would go to New York Fashion Week and it was just the most incredible thing, and the designers, that whole landscape has changed so much. Now, back in New York at Fashion Week, it's just completely different in the way I think influencers and like these TikTok stars are now the people sitting in the seats at Fashion Week when it used to be so exclusive. So what about that part? I mean, has Fashion Week at all played a positive or negative role in this transformation of fast fashion?
Well, I mean, you know, as I said, there was a lot of talk during lockdown about how fashion weeks were unsustainable, that, you know, asking however many tens of thousands of people to move around the 4 fashion capitals of the world, catwalks that were showing endless product and endless trends, you know, that wasn't sustainable. Well, you know, they came back with a bang when the revenge spend hit in and everything went back to how it was before. Look, you know, I've been to fashion shows for years and they are huge fun. It's like a massive conference, industry conference, and it's fun and lots of business gets done and lots of personalities kind of, you know, surface in it, and, you know, there's a huge amount of creativity on display, but also there's a huge amount of, you know, just unnecessary, you know, commerce happening. Like, how many of those catwalk shows now are putting out outfits and pieces that you've seen before? How much of that is really new? There's a lot of talk in the industry right now that in order to maintain the volume of sales that have been going on for the last 3 or 4 years, all of those designers and brands are having to play it really safe when it comes to creativity, which means that everything you're seeing, you've seen already. There are very few brands that are doing something interesting and different and new right now. There are some, and they are really great shows to watch, but then the bulk of it is actually just same old, same old. Should they be showing at Fashion Week? No, they shouldn't. They don't need to. They shouldn't even be existing. Like, that's, do you need another tuxedo? I don't think you do. You've probably got 3 or 4 of them in your wardrobe already. Or if not, you can buy them secondhand. Like, you know, how much of this stuff do we actually need anymore?
It's such a good point, and I don't know if it is media and social media that's escalated this to make people so much more desperate, I think, for that next thing, or to try and find maybe more knockoffs because they see somebody wearing it. Do you feel like social media has played a positive element to this, or no?
No. Social media has been like horrific, and you know, I think the #1 search engine now for buying stuff is not a search engine, it's social media. So people are shopping through social media now, more through social media than through web. So social media has kind of sped up the whole process, made the whole purchasing cycle so much more efficient. which means it's just easier to shop. How many times have you bought something on social media and then regretted it afterwards?
Actually, fun fact, never in my, I'm like so 19, I'm like a 90-year-old. I've never bought anything from TikTok or Instagram.
Amazing.
But not because I literally don't know how. It doesn't go through my mind to do that. And I don't really buy a lot. Have you?
No, but I've looked at TikTok Shop
Yeah.
and it's frighteningly brilliant
Yeah.
and efficient. And I mean, if you're so inclined, like if you are, what TikTok Shop will do is it will, first of all, the algorithm will kind of judge your mood and your likes, and then it will serve you up content that suits that. And then basically you can just click on that content and it's, click to purchase. It's like 2 clicks away from watching it. Is it arriving on your doorstep?
Yeah.
And obviously it's kind of really competitively priced. It's very efficient, obviously, the TikTok algorithm, which, goes back to my whole thing, which is we've got to buy less because we've got to make sure that our purchases are really, really considered rather than in the heat of the moment and something we might later regret.
So fascinating, because when I think about TikTok Shop and even the fulfillment, I mean, I have an e-commerce business now, and I mean, it's the only thing I've ever tried with TikTok Shop, and we only had 1 sale, I think, from it, but people want it so fast. Part of the customized part of this product, I can't even be on TikTok Shop because you have to fulfill it within 2 days. So it's not exactly small business friendly. They're even leaning towards more of the brands that are just very cheap, very fast to get.
Exactly. It's a high volume, low cost business model, which is exactly what we don't want. And actually there's a huge fear now in the States because if they ban TikTok, a lot of the businesses that have built themselves off the back of TikTok Shop are going to suddenly find themselves with nowhere to go. But my argument would be maybe they shouldn't be there in the first place because they don't have the integrity to be there.
I also they've been saying it for a while, they're going to ban it. I just don't see them doing it. They seem on the brink of it. I don't know. It just seems I don't feel like they would actually ever do it.
Maybe they'll do it when they invade Greenland.
Yeah. It just seems like too much freedom of speech to me with how many people are on it.
Well, it's the tariff thing, isn't it?
But yeah.
It's the whole I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen?
So on the career side of things, what advice do you have for someone who's young in their 20s and really doesn't know what to do for a career or how to reach out and introduce themselves to someone? Because you've been in the fashion for the most part, but I think this career pivot into sustainability is so fascinating. And I think quite also inspiring to have gone back to university to learn all of this.
I mean, when I was younger, my dad was a surgeon and he really loved his job. He loved medicine. He loved going to the hospital every day. He loved making patients well. He was hugely vocationally motivated. And I looked at him and thought, my God, how can I find something that is as vocationally motivating as that? I wasn't any good at science, so there was no way I was going to go into medicine. And then by the time I left university, I still didn't know what I was going to do. So I thought, well, look, if I can't find something that hugely motivates me, why don't I just make my career about doing as many things as I possibly can and enjoying the variety, which is pretty much what I've done. And I think nowadays, with the speed at which everything is changing and also with the looming kind of AI revolution that's coming, it's going to be really difficult to predict what jobs and careers are going to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So I would just say my piece of advice to everyone would be is get ready for change and get ready to be nimble and to pivot and to be flexible. And ultimately, you're going to be happy if you follow your interests. So if you work out what you're interested in, what piques your curiosity, what you enjoy spending time with, and you focus on that, and then accept the fact that you may have to kind of move in and out of different jobs and different industries, but kind of following what interests you, then hopefully you will have a wholesome and interesting career.
My biggest piece of advice is for people to stay curious. I think people
Yes,
forget that
brilliant.
because they get so caught up in the day-to-day. Yeah. And if you don't have something that, as you said, piques your curiosity, how was going back to university to study?
Oh my God, it was such a revelation. I mean, I did it because I was just I need to find out about this stuff because whatever I do next in my life, this is going to have a bearing on it. So I better just go and find out about it. And then within 3 or 4 days of starting the course, I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And just learning again, like going into something that I was genuinely curious about and being fed like top-notch information and having my brain challenged was just like, wow, so nourishing, so much fun, so interesting, such a great way to spend my time. I honestly, I mean, you know, I will do it again in a heartbeat, I'm sure. You know, next time something really kind of piques my curiosity, I'll go and really learn about it. It's like learning is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Love that, and it's so important, and it's so inspiring, because at any time, at any age, you can always do a career pivot. You can always go to university. You can always learn something. You talk a lot about sustainability as well in your newsletter that I love to read. How often does that come out? It's weekly or bi-weekly?
So I have a Substack that goes out weekly called It's Not Sustainable, which is a just wonderful, it's sort of like the kind of, it's like the learning thing. It's where you get to deep dive into a subject, research it really well, talk about it. You know, you get the length on Substack that you don't get on social media to really go into something, which kind of gives your readers the opportunity to really focus on something rather than being that kind of, you know, horrible sort of, you know, 3-second attention span thing that we all have all of the time. It's so nice to focus. By the way, podcasts are another great thing. It's like at the same time as, you know, being, you know, having our attention grabbed by so many things that there are around us, there are also these platforms like Substack and podcasts where we really allow ourselves to kind of go deep dive into a particular subject or conversation or line of thought. And I really enjoy reading other readers on Substack. It's a really, really great platform. So that comes out once a week. And then I also have the Rule of 5 campaign on Substack as well. So if you are interested in following Rule of 5, there's all sorts of resources about how you can do that, how you can swap, you can borrow, you can mend, you can recycle, you can upcycle, all the things that you can do so that you're continuing to enjoy fashion without buying anything new.
What are the 5 items you're buying this year? Do you pre-plan this?
Yes, and that's half the fun. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to buy? What are my 5 items going to buy? I know that I need a dress. Okay. Like I used to be such a dress girl. And in the last few years, I've just bought trousers and jackets. Well, last year I just bought trousers and jackets, and I really miss having a good dress in my life. So I want to find a really fabulous dress this year.
Do you have a brand in mind?
No, I don't. I'm not being inspired by anything out there that I see, so I've got to do some proper research. But we're only the 9th of Jan today.
So you have time to decide.
I have time to decide.
Tiffanie, what makes you fearless?
Oh, God, I don't know. We've all got fear inside us, haven't we? Do you know what? Honestly, Alexa, I don't think, I just do. My dad always says this about me. He's just like, you just do things without considering the consequences. He thinks that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
I think it's good because you're naive enough to not sketch yourself out. It's the when you think that freaks you out, right? Yeah. So if you just do it without any thought, you're like right in it.
And what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, just do it. Yeah. And then you can always, like, if it doesn't work out, try something else.
Tiffanie, where can everyone find you on social media, get the book?
At Tiff Darke on Instagram, whattowear.world for the book, What to Wear and Why by Tiffanie Darke, and then Substack, It's Not Sustainable, and Rule of 5.
Thank you so much for joining Dare to be Fearless today. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned into the show. I will link everything about Tiffanie and her work in the show notes. And if you're interested in getting any Chief Swag microphone covers, you can use the discount ChiefSwag10 at chiefswagofficer.com. And I'll see you guys next week for a new episode of Dare to be Fearless.